Well, sir, questions 6 to 12 on today's order paper addresses the use of dialect in films. The two sets of questions, while distinct, are related. So may I seek your permission to allow MDDI to provide the answers to questions 6 to 12 before MCCY and MDDI address any supplementary questions that the members may have. Members may be better informed after hearing both sets of responses, and that might give better clarity to our discussions.
Yes, you may. Please proceed.
So the Speak Mandarin campaign was launched in 1979. By promoting a common language across the Chinese community, it helps Chinese Singaporeans from different dialect backgrounds to communicate with one another, and it preserves access to the Chinese culture through Mandarin rather than through separate dialects. By simplifying the linguistic environment, it also gives our bilingual policy the best chance to succeed. And these objectives remain valid today. The Promote Mandarin Council, which comprises distinguished private and public individuals across all different sectors who are volunteers, regularly reviews the campaign to keep its framing, approach, and objectives relevant and meaningful in Singapore's multicultural context. Well, it's important to do so as the language environment continues to evolve. Singapore families are using English more at home, and much as our young want to be better at Mandarin, the opportunities to do so may be insufficient. So hence, the campaign has evolved from promoting Mandarin as a common language to strengthening the appreciation for our Singapore Chinese cultural identity and making the learning of Mandarin fun and enjoyable. Its current tagline, 讲华语我也可以, or Speak Mandarin, Yes I Can, encourages everyone to learn Mandarin even as English becomes more dominant in daily life. In education, MSF and MOE are setting aside more curriculum time to expose young Chinese students to Mandarin. For older students, we provide opportunities to those with the aptitude and interest to develop into bicultural talents. It's a challenging task, and our Chinese teachers are working very hard, and we'll continue to do our best to continue to uphold the bilingual policy. As the use of English continues to displace mother tongues, the use of dialects in Singapore has continued to decline. And we increasingly see dialect artistic materials not as competing against the use of Mandarin, but as part of our heritage and cultural practices that deepens Singaporeans' appreciation of our cultural heritage. Hence, the National Arts Council supports art groups that practices traditional forms of dialect cultures, such as the Siong Ling Musical Association, which preserves Nan Yin, and Nam Hwa Opera, the Teochew opera group. The National Heritage Board recognizes and supports practitioners and groups that transmit Chinese dialect culture. Clan associations such as the Singapore Hokkien Hui Kwan or the Teochew Poyip Hui Kwan and Hainan Hui Kwan also conduct regular dialect classes for interested Singaporeans. Our linguistic diversity and heritage are distinctive parts of Singapore Chinese culture. The government welcomes ideas to preserve dialect cultures while upholding the importance of Mandarin. We will continue to take in feedback and will work with the community to consider carefully what further steps are appropriate to support and to promote our distinctive Singapore Chinese culture within our multicultural society.
SMS Tan, you will be taking questions 6 to 12, right? Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, my response will cover the questions raised by Mr. Cai Yin Zhou, Mr. Gerald Giam, Mr. Kenneth Tiong, Mr. Saktiandi Supaat, Mr. Dennis Tan, Ms. Valerie Lee, Mr. Liang Eng Hwa, and Dr. Neo Kok Beng in today's order paper, as well as related questions by Mr. Darrell David and Ms. Mariam Jaffa for subsequent sittings. If members are satisfied with the response, they may wish to withdraw their questions after this session. Guidelines on language use in media are implemented by the Infocomm Media Development Authority, or IMDA. They support the government's long-standing policy to promote Mandarin as one of 4 official languages and have generally served us well. However, as noted in MCCY's earlier reply today, Singapore's language environment has evolved. Recognizing this, in implementing the guidelines, IMDA has exercised greater flexibility to allow more dialect content in films. Each year, around 30 to 40 dialect films are screened at film festivals. At the same time, IMDA has allowed unrestricted screenings of films with substantial use of dialect, such as 881 or Papayao, Long Long Time Ago, and Wonderland. For the film Dear You, IMDA has approved a total of 272 screenings of the Teochew version and is prepared to approve additional screenings should the film distributor request them in response to audience demand. Beyond these implementation changes, several members have called for the guidelines themselves to be reviewed. We recognize that the circumstances have changed since the guidelines were first introduced. There is therefore scope to consider how we can expand the space for dialects while continuing to uphold the importance of Mandarin. In doing so, we should also take into account the different media platforms. For example, there are no dialogue restrictions for art performances or content available on the internet and online streaming services. On free-to-air television and radio, we believe that Mandarin should continue to be the mainstay. For cinemas, we are prepared to allow more screenings of dialect language films so as to provide audiences with greater access to such content. We appreciate the feedback from members and will carefully consider what further steps are appropriate.
Mr. Cai Yin Zhou.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to declare my interest as advisor to Chinatown Heritage Centre, an attraction referencing 1950s Singapore, with our exhibits featuring dialect content. Parasite sparked conversations on inequality, how to make billions before grandma dies, spurred end-of-life conversations. Dear You has renewed interest in the sacrifices of our forefathers and personal heritage. Locally, Parasite screened close to 12,000 sessions, How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies around 5,000, Dear You in Mandarin 2,570, while its Teochew version, the original, a mere 126 screenings, public screenings as of early July. My first question to MDDI is, today, cinema is the only mainstream medium in Singapore where Chinese dialect content is restricted. OTT streamings on social media platforms and YouTube all already carry dialect content without equivalent restrictions. Should cinema remain subject to the campaign's dialect restriction rationale? There is also a commercial case. Our cinema operators have been under real pressure. Dear You shows that original dialect programming can be an asset, not a niche indulgence. Dear You has drew families off their sofas and back into theatres together across generations, including older Singaporeans who otherwise might not step into a cinema at all. Will the ministry go further in the review to consider removing this default restriction? In Mandarin, please. 师父领进门.
The master leads the way, but the individual has to cultivate good habits on its own. And when the master becomes old, sometimes there's nobody, no younger people to take over. And then it will be hard to continue the culture and traditions. I would like to know how does MCCY ensure that dialect and our traditional culture will continue to be passed on to the next generation at home, and because dialect is often used between the younger generation and their grandparents.
So I thank the member for his clarifications on the review of the use of dialect in cinemas and films. As I've explained earlier in my reply, we are hearing feedback from different parties, industry stakeholders, community, and we appreciate and welcome the conversations that has arose from the Dear You screening. Actually, just yesterday, I had a screening in my constituency for my residents, one theatre in Teochew, one theatre in Mandarin. I went by, speak to my residents before my MPS sessions. It's very interesting. For the Teochew hall, almost all seniors, maybe some of the middle-aged people like me were there. Some were there because they wanted to hear the original Teochew dialect movie. Some watched the Mandarin one and wanted to hear the Teochew one. But when I went to the Mandarin hall, it was very interesting. Some will actually watch the Teochew one and wanted to watch the Mandarin one because they really couldn't quite understand the Teochew dialect, especially for non-Teochew speaking or native Teochew speaking individuals. But in addition to seniors, I was very pleasantly surprised to see many young people, children, secondary school, even primary school. They were there accompanying their grandparents, their parents, and it was very good to see a family affair. And the young people, when I spoke to them, wanted to understand more about the environment in which their great-grandparents or grandparents had lived through in the early days of independence. So, although the member talked about Teochew screening of the original Teochew dialect of the firm being popular, and we have already said that we will provide flexibility, and we're continuing to provide flexibility. In fact, the number that the member cited has been updated in my reply. I said 272, if the member listened correctly just now, carefully just now. And the firm distributor knows that we continue to provide flexibility. So in practice, if the firm distributor feels that audience demand is there for the Teochew original firm, we will provide flexibility. But more importantly, having a Mandarin version creates a bigger access to many more audiences in Singapore, not just those who are speaking the dialect, especially our young people. So there is value in having a Mandarin version of the firm, in addition to being aligned with our broader language policy. The member mentioned a little bit about OTT, over-the-top platforms, internet streaming, for example. Different platforms have historically been regulated differently based on different reach of audiences. Cinemas, being a publicly regulated exhibition space in Singapore, ought to be seen closer to mainstream media. Having said that, as I explained in my reply, we appreciate that the language environment has changed and are prepared to see how we can expand access to dialect movies as we take our review. So I'll just add on finally to say that over the years, it's not as if our guidelines have been static. We have been updating it, refining it, adapting them, for example, providing more flexibility of dialect use in firms, and even some of the mainstream radio stations and TV channels. So our policy was remaining true to the policy intent of the larger language policy in Singapore. The implementation of it has evolved, have been flexible, have been pragmatic, taking into consideration the environment, the language environment. And I mentioned earlier in my reply, some of the local movies like Papayao, Wanderlust, substantive dialect content in the film. But look at the historical context, look at heritage value, and reflects Singapore stories. And IMDA has taken a flexible, pragmatic approach, and will continue to do so.
Ms. Eileen Chong. Oh, sorry, Minister David Teo.
Mr. Speaker, to answer the Chinese portion of the member's question. And in the spirit of the Speak Mandarin campaign, if you allow me to take this one, SQ in Mandarin. 方言艺术是我们
Dialect is actually a traditional culture of ours. It's a very important part of our culture. For the National Arts Council, we've also been making sure that we cultivate our culture, and dialect is also a kind of culture, and the relevant arts group with regards to the dialect will also do their part, encouraging the young people to use different kinds of dialects to sing the traditional arts, Chinese traditional arts. Through NAC also has scholarship to try to cultivate a new group of arts practitioners in Singapore. And this year, Chen Wei Tian, who's an arts practitioner, started to learn performances, stage performances ever since he was a kid. He already started participating in this, and NEC also helped to subsidize his performance in Shanghai as well. And recently, we've also worked together to come up with a traditional art performance, stage performance. And we hope to be able to portray different kinds of art performances to our audiences. Last year, the NAC has also given grants to 10 different art shows, including Teochew, Hokkien, as well as other different dialect performances. Many of these Chinese dialect performances have also been enrolled in the kind of the performances that we portray to the audience so that they can also see what a Chinese dialect performance is like. We hope to be able to expand this space and also to find more new, younger performers in this area.
PQs, I'd like to get as many questions to be answered as many as possible. Just now, Mr. Chai, I must say that your asking of your SQ was a bit too long. You went a little bit into the mini speech. I almost stopped you, but it's a good negative example of what I hope to see going forward. Ms. Eileen Chong.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very heartened to hear SMS Tan confirm that IMDA is indeed looking to expand space for dialects while upholding Mandarin. I'm also very heartened to hear Minister Neo actually then respond to this by saying that actually dialects are no longer seen in competition with Mandarin, right? In fact, they play a role in deepening cultural appreciation of our Chinese heritage. So I would like to actually echo the Promote Mandarin Council's position that we actually do not need to pick sides between Mandarin and dialects. So I would like to ask whether MCCY will be working with IMDA to review the relevance of the policy which still requires permission for us to screen dialect films, instead of trying to see where we can exercise more flexibility. Why not consider offering, the freedom of simply just screening these dialect films? Because if dialect is always the one that requires permission, then have we not already chosen a side? Thank you.
Minister David Neo.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for her support. As I explained earlier, MCCY and MDDI are open to ideas about how can we preserve dialect cultures while upholding the importance of Mandarin, and we'll continue to take in all the feedback and consider carefully the appropriate next steps on how to do this well better. Thank you.
Mr. Dennis Tan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have raised issues relating to the preservation and use of dialects in this House several times in the past, including requests to lift the broadcast film ban, the broadcast ban. And indeed, I'm heartened to hear the ministers have spoken on this. And indeed, in my view, the main competitor to Mandarin today is not dialects, but English. I would like to ask the government, given that the media is the primary vehicle for youth culture engagement, whether the either ministry agree that to review the lifting of the 1981 dialect broadcast restrictions to allow meaningful dialect-rich content that connects young Singaporeans to their grandparents, to their family, and importantly, to their cultural heritage. And I say this, as I said before, we are reaching a tipping point with an aging population, younger generation with limited exposure to dialects. And once this culture and heritage dies off, there's no way of rebuilding. And I would therefore like to ask the government to really consider putting more effort to work with the clans and other civic groups to promote our dialect heritage. And a question for SMS Tan. I don't think you have addressed my PQ directly. And I would like to ask, relating to my PQ, ASQ first, and will the ministry consider establishing a standing institutional arrangement between IMDA and NHB with regards to a consultation on the heritage aspects for dialect films? Thank you.
So I can take the member's question first about the institution arrangement. Well, IMDA works very closely with different government agencies, including the National Heritage Boards. In fact, we work very closely in terms of looking at firms, the classification of firms. So there's no need for explicit institutions that are already doing so. But more importantly, I think his earlier point was whether we consider heritage, as artistic merit, and the context in which the dialects is used in a firm. And I'd like to reply in the affirmative, as I explained earlier in my reply, and I gave some examples of some of the locally made firms like Papa Yao, long time ago, and many others. We do consider the context in which the dialect is used in the firm, whether it's appropriate, reflects the cultural context of the milieu of that time. For example, Papa Yao was telling about a story about the Ge-Tai culture, and some of it, the nuances of it, the texture of it requires the dialect to be used. So we do consider. So just want to assure the member that we do so.
Ms. Valerie Lee.
Thank you, Speaker. I have two SQs, one for MCCY. So with fewer Singaporeans speaking dialects reach heritage tied to these dialects risk being lost, what steps are MCCY taking to ensure that Chinese dialect cultures are being systematically documented, preserved, and transmitted, particularly to younger Singaporeans? The second SQ is for MDDI. Will the ministry publish clearer guidelines incorporating the said flexibility for dialect general screenings and share them in advance so that film distributors will know what criteria will apply to these films? Thank you.
Minister David Neo.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for a question, but Chinese dialect cultures are an integral part of our distinctive Singapore Chinese culture. When it comes to documentation, the NHB works very closely with heritage practitioners, clan associations, and all who are keen to, and they fund them as well, to research and to document our dialects and cultural heritage. So one example is in Singapore Amoy Association recently published an article or book on the essays on Hokkien culture in Singapore. Well, another example is Singapore Chinese Cultural Centre's Culturepedia. Well, that's a repository on Singapore Chinese culture, and it has documented specific aspects of the Chinese dialect cultures with articles ranging from languages all the way to music. When it comes to transmission and education, we also safeguard and we expand the space for our dialect cultures through initiatives such as the Stewards for the Intangible Culture Heritage Award. So I think the member was also with me last year at this award, but these awards are to recognize individuals and organizations who take on a strong role in promoting dialects within our context. So I'm also very glad to note that one of the winners of the Youth Award is Mr. Adrian Ong, who practices and promotes Hokkien string and glove puppetry. So we'll continue to work with all our clan associations, heritage practitioners, and all who are keen to document and to expand the space for our Singapore Chinese dialect cultures.
Mr. Gerald Giam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My focus of my SQ would be on the film classification guidelines, which currently state that, quote, Chinese films meant for theatrical release should generally be in Mandarin, in line with the Speak Mandarin campaign. Films with dialect content are allowed on a case-by-case basis, unquote. For the past 40 years or so, hasn't the Speak Mandarin campaign been geared more towards encouraging English-speaking Chinese Singaporeans to speak Mandarin instead of changing the language-speaking habits of dialect-speaking Singaporeans? If so, why do the film classification guidelines still hold on to the past focus of this campaign by restricting the screenings of dialect films in Singapore? And be that as it may, can case-by-case basis in the guidelines be interpreted as allowing certain dialect films a general commercial release without restrictions on the number of screenings?
SMS turn.
So, let me take a step back and answer Mr. Giam's question. As earlier articulated by Minister for MCCY or the broader language policy, Mandarin is one of the 4 official languages in Singapore, and it's a mainstay. And the historic context of Speak Mandarin Campaign is about promoting the use of Mandarin. At that point in time, the language environment was different. And because it succeeded, that's why the language environment here today is different. Our young people are proficient, competent with English and many with Mandarin as well. So it's a success. The policy objectives still remain because it's important, as articulated by MCCY earlier. But our implementation of the guidelines, of the regulations, have evolved with a changing language environment. And I gave many examples earlier. And today's conversation or debate here in the Parliament around DLU is a step in that direction. And I said earlier, we welcome views from stakeholders, industry members, community partners, people who are enthusiastic about dialect culture, enthusiastic about trying to understand their roots, identity, including younger ones, and welcome it as part of a conversation. And as part of this conversation, we are reviewing our current film classification framework with respect to use of dialect in films. And we will take some time to do so because it's an evolution, it's a thoughtful approach, speaking to people, making adjustments, not abrupt changes, like all good policies are. So I want to assure Mr. Giam that for DLU, we have given flexibility. The film distributor knows we're giving him flexibility. And I earlier mentioned we approved another 100 screenings today. That's why bringing up the screenings to 272. And if there's more demand, we will discuss with the film distributor and see how we can provide additional flexibility. But we will take a review as it comes along, and certainly something that we'll speak to all members, industry partners, community partners, and take their views on board.
Mr. Saktiandi Supaat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have 2 SQs. My PQs that Ms. SMS answered earlier, I thank him for answering that because those are questions that my dialect-speaking seniors in Toa Payoh East and their families have actually raised to me. My first SQ is, as Singapore population ages, does the government regard original language Chinese dialect films as supporting active aging, social inclusion, and in particular intergenerational bonding? If so, how is this reflected in IMDA's policy? Second SQ is, has IMDA assessed audience demand for original language Chinese dialect films, particularly among seniors and younger Singaporeans? And if not, will such an assessment inform any future policy review? Thank you.
SMS Tan.
So I thank the members for his 2 supplementary questions. Well, firstly, I must say I empathize with his Toa Payoh East residents. Like Bedok, we have one of the more older estates and many seniors. And of course, they hold dialect and engagement with dialect as a very core part of their identity, their experiences. And I must add that beyond just films and cinema, actually there are many other venues for which seniors and those over not so old, younger ones, to engage with dialect culture. Clan associations, programs, different streaming applications, or even activities in the community. So it's not just isolated or confined to films. Ironically, as I mentioned earlier in my reply, when I visited the Mandarin theatre, theatre that screened the Mandarin version of the DLU show, there were actually more young people, more intergenerational engagements, because the children came together with their parents and grandparents. And because it was in Mandarin, it was more accessible to younger people. And when you talk about intergenerational cohesion, engagement, it really goes beyond just language. It's about creating the shared experiences and a space from which these conversations and dialogue happen. So we will certainly consider the different inputs as part of the review, but rest assured to the member that there are many other options and venues for seniors or younger ones to get engaged with dialect culture.
Mr. Kenneth Tiong.
谢谢议长先生。上个月，我和选区的潮州居民谈话，他们问我，做你比赛。
Thank you very much. Because last week when I was in my constituency, some of my residents asked me, why can't we speak? Why can't we watch Teochew shows? I've got a few questions here. For the ministers, did you watch the Chinese version, the Mandarin version, or the Teochew version of the movie? So I hope that you can explain the objective very clearly, because your objective, is it to promote the use of Mandarin or to restrict the use of dialects? Because these are two different objectives. And also for the government, would you also just create and implement policies simply to restrict the dialects? And can you remove all those restrictions that are just unnecessary? And here, with regards to the MCCY minister, I would like to ask if, for the dialect group, will the government encourage the more intake of people who can speak the dialect? First of all, we ministers have no time to watch movies.
Dialect Hokkien classes. I think we work with the clan associations all the time, and they are very interested in promoting their dialects as well as our respective cultures, because, like I said, they contribute very distinctively towards our Singapore Chinese culture. And if there's a demand, I think they will be more than happy to kind of extend their classes to more people.
SMS Tan.
So I thank the member for his excuse in Mandarin. Please allow me to reply in Mandarin as well. 议长先生，我在英语演讲谈到了我。
Earlier on in my English answer, I mentioned of the different policies that the government has implemented, and let me use Mandarin to summarize them here. For this movie, it is indeed very, very heartwarming, and we do see that the audience have also reacted quite fervently to it, and we know that the language that is used in here has also seen a lot of warm support from the elderly folks in Singapore. So we have garnered the feedback from different groups of people. We also are very grateful for the feedback given to us. The truth is that the government does pay attention to these dialect films from time to time, and we will make sure that we can have the space and the time to promote and broadcast these films. We will listen very carefully to the feedback of everybody and consider whether or not there is a need to step up the removal of these restrictions to make it looser so that more people can also appreciate these dialect films.
Last SQ, Mr. Liang Eng Hwa.
Thank you, sir. In Mandarin, please. 首先，我要感谢资讯通信媒体发展局处理。
First of all, I would like to thank IMDA for the approach to address the filming, or rather to deal with the playing of this movie, and that actually displays a lot of flexibility. I believe that a lot of the Singaporeans want to continue to pass on their own culture and their languages through the filming of such a dialect. So I am very delighted to hear that the government will continue to adapt such a approach. Now, in the process of reviewing policies, should there be any dialect films in the future? Will IMDA be more open and to have a more transparent approach to make decisions in terms of the showing of these dialects films?
继续吧。
感谢议长先生。
Thank you very much. Here, as I mentioned earlier, our policy objective of speaking Mandarin in recent years remains the same. We hope, and we still endeavor to pursue this objective. However, when it comes to the policy itself, how can we show some flexibility in terms of allowing the release of films in dialects. We have maintained a very flexible approach. As I mentioned earlier, when I answered some of the other MPs, I said that Singapore, we do have our own local productions like 881 and Wonderland. So we do have films in dialects. Yet we have also adopted a very flexible approach to allow these films to be broadcast. So for this particular movie, Dear Me, we see that many Singaporeans have supported this film. There's also great demand among the audiences. We will want to look carefully at this particular movie. If there is a need, then perhaps we can also allow for more filming and broadcasting of other Teochew dialect films. So here I'd like to reassure you that we will look at it in a very pragmatic manner. But what is more important is that we cannot forget our original objective. Our original objective was to speak Mandarin.
Last SQ, Dr. Neo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Here, I suppose we are all talking about movies, but here I want to talk about radio stations instead. Because as the society ages, our elderly seniors listen to songs. They listen to a lot of songs, but the problem is that they cannot listen to dialect songs today. So I wonder, for our 6 radio broadcast stations currently, can we have at least one broadcast station that can help to play all these songs from the golden melodies from the back then? Perhaps about 50% can be in Mandarin and the other 50% can be in Chinese dialects, so that we can take care of these elderly folks, so that when they are free, in their free time, they can still enjoy and indulge in the kind of songs that they enjoy. I myself don't listen.
Sir, in respect to the Mandarin supplementary question, let me also try to address it in Mandarin.
So what he mentioned earlier was not just movies, but also TVs as well, and broadcasting stations. Actually, we feel that Mandarin should still be the mainstream language. So we still want to speak primarily Mandarin. In the past decades. If we look at our entire linguistic landscape, it's very different from what it was like in the past. When I was a kid, it was very difficult for me to learn Mandarin because there were different Chinese dialects that are quite similar to the Mandarin, how you pronounce Mandarin. So when I was in Huaqiao Secondary School, I had some classmates who came from Malaysia, and they studied primary school in Malaysia, and later on they came to Nanchao Secondary School in Singapore. It was all right when they wrote in Mandarin, but when they tried to speak verbally in Mandarin, we can hear the different accents coming. It influences from Cantonese or Hokkien. So when we broadcast on our broadcasting stations, for example, we want to promote Mandarin, but we do have some flexibility here. For example, on Channel 8, they do have a certain slot on Friday mornings where they will then show these dialect shows, including the news broadcast. And then also from 10:30 a.m., 11:30 a.m., 12:30 a.m., we also have different dialect broadcast of news on the radio stations to cater to the needs of these seniors. So we do want these seniors to also have the space and the time to understand what is going on. So we are flexible when we come to implement these policies. But more importantly, when it comes to the movie, especially for this particular Dear Me movie, we see that there's a lot of demand, so we will look into this.